When you live on a boat, you'll often find that one problem leads to another. How do you deal? I'm Carolyn Sherlock, and in this episode of the Boat Galley Podcast, I'll share how one choice made while doing a wiring job led to over 2 weeks of related problems. Not fun, but yes, we dealt with it. And you can too. This episode of the Boat Galley Podcast is sponsored by Julie Bradley, best-selling author of 2 sailing classics, Escape from the Ordinary and Crossing Pirate Waters. Now a warning, these books are hard to put down. Join Glenn and Julie for off-the-beaten-path adventures in extraordinary places. Claw through force-10 storms with them and hold your breath through pirate-infested parts of the Middle East. Julie's witty, vibrant writing takes you along every twist and turn. At times, you'll wish you were there, and at others, you'll be glad you weren't. These books take you along for the trip of a lifetime. Find both Escape from the Ordinary and Crossing Pirate Waters on Amazon. I highly recommend them. A couple of years ago, we had 2 weeks of basically never-ending series of interconnected problems. Let's talk about how it all went down. First, I wired our new radar and inadvertently got the power wires on the wrong side of a watermaker hose to have a tidy installation. Well, that was problem 1. Dave noticed the wiring problem and saw that the hose to be unattached from the watermaker moved and reconnected on the right side of the wires. So he did that, thinking it was easier than me redoing the wires. Well, 2 days later, he ran the watermaker, which runs off our Honda generator. To start the watermaker, the generator has to be running full speed, but once it's started, the generator can be turned down to economy mode. Normally, I go up on deck to turn the generator to economy while Dave watches the watermaker. But that day I was doing something else, and so Dave started the watermaker and immediately went on deck to turn the generator down. When he came back below, he saw there was a fountain in the watermaker compartment. The hose he had reattached had not been firmly connected, and salt water was going everywhere. Well, that was problem 2. Okay, he turned the watermaker off, cleaned everything up, and then went ahead and ran the watermaker. 4 days later, when Dave went to run the watermaker again, it wouldn't turn on. There was a hum, and then it would overload the generator, which would turn off. Okay, problem number 3. A bit of troubleshooting with the help of the Rain Man dealer revealed that salt water had most likely gotten inside the motor, corroded it, and it was seized. We were going to have to uninstall the watermaker to repair it. Now, when we'd installed the watermaker, we put it in a place where 4 of the 8 mounting screws were fairly inaccessible. That was problem number 4. It took some good sailorly words and breaking 2 mounting blocks off gel coat in order to remove it. We finally got it off 3 days later and contacted the Rain Man repair facility in Fort Lauderdale about getting it to them for service. We decided to take the watermaker to Fort Lauderdale and wait for the repair so that we could get it back as quickly as possible. Since it had just suddenly not worked, the membranes weren't pickled. We needed to get the unit fixed as soon as possible so we could flush the membranes and keep the ickies from growing on them. That was problem number 5. Saturday afternoon saw us drive to Fort Lauderdale, and we made arrangements to drop the watermaker off on Sunday morning so that repair could begin on Monday. We should have the unit back on Monday afternoon. Well, Monday didn't go as expected for the Rain Man repair facility, and they didn't start on our unit until 3:45, but they thought they'd have the unit ready for us the next morning. They were pretty sure the motor was the problem, and they had a spare on hand. Okay, we'd stay another night, and we got a motel room for 1 more night. We could call that problem number 6. At 7 p.m., we got word that there was good news and bad news. The good news was the problem was the motor. This was far less expensive to replace than the high-pressure pump. The bad news was that the box marked as containing the motor for our unit actually held a motor for the previous model. A new motor would have to be ordered. Problem 7. At that point, we decided to return to Marathon, about 3 hours away, in the boat on Wednesday morning. The further good news was that we should be able to rig a freshwater flush for the membranes off using the boat's freshwater system. Creating that would be problem number 8. We stopped by Home Depot on our way back into Marathon and spent about an hour planning and finding parts for the new freshwater flush. About 3 hours work back on the boat, and Dave had rigged up a very basic freshwater flush system. Normally, we shouldn't let the membranes go longer than a week between flushes, and it had now been 9 days. We hoped that they were still okay. For that initial flush, we were okay using the water maker water in our tanks. Any water with chlorine in it, which is most city water, would also damage our membranes. We hadn't had city water in our water tanks in over 2 years, so we figured it was okay. But we didn't have an unlimited supply of non-chlorinated water in our tanks. We were going to have to start getting water from our marina, and that meant that it was city water. And it would sure be a lot easier for cooking and washing if we could just use a regular water system instead of living out of jerry cans. That meant we had to install a charcoal filter on the water line going to the membranes. Okay, this was problem 9. Back to Home Depot for the various parts to do just that. Then a trip to West Marine for the connectors that Home Depot didn't have. Then another trip to Home Depot for the extra parts needed to connect to what West Marine had. It's a Rube Goldberg mess of 5 parts to connect 2 together. But it worked. We were hoping to leave in just over 2 weeks for the Bahamas, and it set us back a little bit. A stupid little bit of miswiring that led to 9 different problems. Our first year of cruising, a situation like that would have had us thinking, we can't deal with this, and what were we thinking to get a boat? We would have each been thinking that, but for the others' actions, we wouldn't have a problem. As the problems mounted, so would our frustration, stress, overwhelm, possibly tears, definitely tearing our hair out. Now we see situations such as this as a challenge. How can we overcome them? Instead of getting frustrated, we stop and come up with a plan of attack. When problems start to multiply, we take it as a sign to slow down and regroup instead of blindly charging ahead. In this case, we reminded each other of the overall goals. Get the water maker repaired and save the membrane. We got the water maker out from where we'd installed it and to the repair facility. When we discovered it couldn't be repaired right away, we figured out an alternate method for flushing the membranes. We hit our goals. Because of the time we spent on that project, we didn't get everything done that we had hoped to do before we left. And we're okay with that. When we first started cruising, we thought that absolutely everything on the list had to be done before we left on the trip. That, in itself, led to a lot of worry and stress. Now we realize the boat will never be perfect. The key is to know what items truly need to be done and what can be done along the way. Safety items have to be done. Things that affect the boat's operation have to be completed and tested. Doctor's appointments can't be skipped. But cleaning, we can do that anywhere. There's grocery stores everywhere. Touching up the interior teak, that can happen in any anchorage. Now, we keep 2 lists. Items that absolutely have to be done before we leave, and things that don't. I can go on and on, but 2 of the big things we've learned in 14 years of cruising are flexibility and ingenuity. Things aren't going to go as inspected or as hoped for. Cruising is a life that will challenge you to deal with what's thrown your way. Now that's wrong. Not just grudgingly deal with the problems that arrive. You have to thrive on finding solutions, develop confidence, triumph. The transformation from being frustrated by problems to feeling that you can deal with them doesn't happen overnight. But hang on, it will happen. And when it does, there's a lot less stress. Did you enjoy this episode of the Boat Galley Podcast? Did you think it helped you at all? Well, be sure to subscribe so that you'll get every episode. And tell your friends about it too, if you think it might help them.
Slow